Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the first video that I do in my sewing series. So I did a little survey on Twitter and I got asked to do a video where I go over like the different parts of the machine and just show you like the different terms and what they are. So I have a Brother sewing machine. They pretty much all work similarly. So once you learn how to use like one Brother sewing machine, then you know pretty much where the features are gonna be on the next one. Anyway, here we go. We're gonna jump right into it. One is called the ST531HD. It also says strong and tough. I learned to sew on the super basic Brother sewing machine. I sewed on that one for like my first year of sewing. I made a bunch of stuff for my wedding on that one. And then after that, I sort of upgraded. I'll put links to the machines that I have. If I can find them on Amazon, I'll put the links in the description. A lot of the Brother sewing machines are really great. The super intro model, it's super lightweight. So if you're sewing like really heavy material or things like that, it's not the greatest, and eventually I did break it. Like the timing got off and I couldn't fix it. So anyway, there's that. I have it plugged in right now. So in the back here, there is an on-off switch. When you turn it on, the light comes on so you can see what you're doing when you sew. Okay, so there we go. So I'm gonna unplug it now to give you guys the rest of the sort of sewing machine tour. Oh, I guess I'll show you guys this. So this is the foot pedal. It sits on the floor and you step on it and it makes the machine go. So you don't have to control the speed with your hands because you have both your hands running the fabric through, and then you step on the pedal to make it stop and start. Okay, so here's the needle. I have it threaded already. So there's two pieces of thread and they come out the back. So this is called the foot. So the foot, so there's a little lever. I'm all turned around because I'm backwards. Let me come around. Okay, so there's a little lever right here up in the machine. And when you push that lever down, it puts the foot down. So you always want to sew with your foot down because that ensures that the fabric feeds evenly through the machine. If you try and sew with the foot up, some of the more advanced machines won't let you. But if it's a super basic machine, it might let you, and then you'll have really weird uneven stitches and it might even get like tangled up because it's not a controlled even feed through the machine. So I'm gonna lift that back up. So here's the needle. If you want to replace the needle, there's a little thing right here. Usually the machines come with a little screwdriver and you just stick it in there and you loosen this and you can pull the needle out and put it back in. Now I'm going to put the foot down because I'm going to show you guys there's this piece over at this end of the machine. It's called a hand crank. So if you watch the needle as I do this, if I turn it towards me, the needle moves down and I can do a full revolution, and that would be one stitch. Now, I don't know exactly why, but you're never supposed to run your hand crank backwards for more than like half a turn. There's like a very specific amount. I don't know if it messes with the timing or if the like engine and gears just aren't designed to move in reverse in that way. So all I can say is that it's a rule that I've followed and it seems to work. Okay, so this is the hand crank. Now this is what you use to select the stitch. So for instance, right now I'm using number 3, this top number here is what I've got selected, which is this Zigzag Stitch is what it's called. And I use that for sewing fabrics that are stretchy because you want the seam to be able to stretch as well. Because if you're putting on something like leggings and the seams don't stretch but the fabric does, then you're just gonna get your stitches fully ripped out and the garment's gonna be ruined. Now if you were sewing just quilting cotton, if you were making a little zipper bag or something like that, then stitch number 2, and I'll show you guys, I'll switch to stitch number 2. Oh, nothing way. Yep, I was right the first time. Here we go. Okay, so then I'm on stitch number 2 at that point. You only want to switch stitches when your needle is in an up position, because sometimes your needle will snap into a different position when you switch stitches. Let me see if I can. So the needle moved a little bit when I changed to number 1. There we go. So if your needle is down inside the machine and then it moves when you switch stitches, it could break your needle. So you always want to have your needle up when you switch stitches. And, you know, there may be more experienced seamstresses out there that disagree with me. And if so, let me know. I am always learning, so I'm happy to be enlightened on better ways to do things. Okay, the next thing is, this is the reverse button. When you start and end a seam, you want to do a couple of reverse stitches so that the stitches will stay in place. Because if you just stitch a long straight line and then you cut the strings off, it's likely that it can just unravel. So let me just grab some fabric, plug my machine back in, and I will show you guys real quick. Okay, so this is just a fabric scrap that I had laying around. So I'm gonna lift up the presser foot, make sure that all my thread is where it should be. Put that guy in there. So I'm gonna stitch a couple stitches. This is the zigzag stitch, so there you go. Then I'm gonna make sure that my needle's at the top. There's a little ridge in the top of this hand crank, so you can tell where the very top is of that revolution. Then I'm gonna press down this and do a couple of stitches backwards in order to make sure that my stitches are gonna stay in place. There we go. So then I'm gonna let this up and then it'll sew forward again. So that's how you would, it's called back stitching. All right, now I'm gonna lift this up, take my fabric out. So I've got one thread at the bottom, one thread at the top. That's exactly how it should be. I'm gonna clip these threads off. I'll show you guys that stitch so you can see what a zigzag stitch looks like. So this is stretchy fabric. This is a stretchy seam. So I could make like leggings or whatever out of this sort of fabric with this sort of a seam. Okay, so up here is the thread. Now there's two things that hold the thread in a sewing machine, and that's how you get your stitch. So here's a spool of thread up here, and that is through the needle. So it has little instructions on the top about how you thread it, but here you go. So here is the spool of thread, and that one comes down and goes through the eye of the needle. And then down here is the bobbin of thread. This is the bobbin case. So they should both be the same color, unless you're doing something funky with your colors, but there you go. If you want your seam to look uniform, then you should use the same color up here as you do down here. Each of these has a specific tension that it's kept at. So if you don't thread it correctly, your tension will be off and your stitches won't look correctly. Same down here, there's a little mechanism that makes sure that it's kept at the right tension in order to make your seams all look nice and pretty. So this is the stitch length dial. So this one controls, well, the length of your stitch. So it's especially obvious when you're doing the straight stitches. You can move it all around, and it just depends on what effect you're going for, or sometimes it has to do with, like, maybe you want really small lengths of your stitch in order to make something look really delicate. So it can depend on the aesthetic and whatnot. Okay, so this is called the spool pin. because that holds the spool of thread. This is called the bobbin winder. Okay, so here's an empty bobbin. This one up here is called the stitch width dial. And so obviously the width of the stitch can be changed, smaller or larger, and it has little diagrams on both sides up here. I'll just show it to you guys. So you can see up here, you've got the width and the length. I normally just mess with these until I get a stitch that looks the way that I want it to. I'm sure that there's more technical reasons why you would do one or the other, and I have no idea what they are. Okay, so this is the upper tension control dial. So that controls the tension of the thread up here. So I don't know, again, all the ins and outs. I always just look it up or look in my manual. I don't usually mess around with the tension on my machine unless like it breaks. But different fabrics will require different tensions. So like if you're sewing silk and you're doing great, and then you move to sewing denim, which is much thicker, you might have to adjust your tension in order to get the stitch to actually stitch the way that you want it to. Okay, so over here is the thread cutter right here. So I'll just show you. Okay, pulling the needle thread, pull it down, and the thread breaks off. So that is the thread cutter. Okay, so this is the needle threader. It's one of my favorite aspects of Brother sewing machines. So I really like that, because otherwise you have to either try and do it by just eyeballing it, or you have to get one of those little needle threader doohickeys, but they're just not as convenient. So I like when it's just included as a part of the machine. Okay, so this is called the bobbin casing, and there you go. I don't know what else to say about it. Okay, so this part is a little accessory holder. So you can pull that off, and then there's this little baggie that comes with all these accessories in it. That's the little compartment. You can close it up and put it back on. So when it's on, there's obviously more of a flat surface to work with, and then when you pull it off, for instance, if I'm sewing like a sleeve or something like that, I like to be able to just loop the sleeve around this thing and be able to spin it without having to like make sure that I'm holding one side from going into the needle. So there's certain reasons why you would want to sew with it off, and there's other reasons why you would want to sew with it on. These down here are called the feed dogs, and these are like little grippy spiky things. There's a little control down here so that you can control whether you want the feed dogs to like poke out a little bit above the top, or whether you want them to be more laid down into your machine. So it may seem kind of complicated based on what I've said here, but basically all you have to know is the first thing you do is you wind a bobbin, then you pop this bobbin in, and there's little diagrams all over the machine, so they'll tell you exactly what to do. So I'm going to put the bobbin in. This little piece of thread sticking out has to go through. There's a little catch right there that makes sure that the tension is correct. Then you put it through here, and that's going to make sure that when I start sewing, this piece of thread is going to come out the back. It's an automatic, I don't know, lower thread puller upper thingy, and it's super convenient. In other machines, you have to thread it like this, make sure the tension is correct. Then you have to use your hand crank to get your needle to stitch when you've got the upper needle threaded, and then you sort of pull both strings at the end. So anyway, you wind your bobbin, you get your bobbin set in. Then you put your spool of thread up here, and you follow the diagrams to make sure that your upper thread is in correctly. Then you thread the needle, and pull the needle thread out through the back, through the center of your presser foot. And then you would take whatever project you want to do, put it in there, put your foot down, and just start sewing. And if your stitches got messed up, then you can mess with the tension if you need to, or the length or the width. I think I said those backwards, width or length. And that's pretty much all you need to know on an immediate basis to just like be off and running with your sewing. Thanks for hanging out with me today and listening to me talk about this sewing machine. Oh, hey, I almost forgot to say, I would love to connect with you guys on my various social medias. I just got a TikTok, which I'm like totally intimidated about. So I'm gonna put all my social media details below. I've got Twitter, Instagram, etc. If you have any of those, come and follow me and we can be friends. Okay, thanks guys. Bye.